So your kind of deals and what you're interested in is mainly, are you mainly interested in buy-to-let or HMO? Do you have a particular model that you're following with your property investing?
The first two properties I bought were standard buy-to-lets in Sheffield and Liverpool. The third one I bought was a BRRR, that's buy, refurbish, refinance, and then rent it out. So that's probably one of the most complex strategies you can do. So I did that on my third property a good 4 years into it. So I wanted to wait. And then now I'm in Hull and I'm looking at doing service accommodation. So I've slowly drifted towards more complex ones. And the reason why...
What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Warren. I am a banker here in London and a property investor across the UK. My goal is to live free and independently from property. So I'm looking for an income of £3,000 per month. If that's what you're on to, like, subscribe. That is what my content is all about. So guys, today's video is something a bit different. It is a collab interview with Johnny over at Millennials with Money. If you don't know him yet, check out his YouTube and his Instagram. He talks about investing for millennials more from a stocks and shares perspective. So it's very good on personal finance and that side of things. Today, we are talking about the property market in England versus the property market in Spain, where he lives. I had a lot of questions for him. I'm always interested in property markets globally. So he interviewed me. We shared about our respective property markets and it was a very interesting discussion. Check it out, guys.
So I know you talk a lot on your channel about you want kind of your property investing to be your legacy and for your children and your children's children. Why did you choose real estate as your route? Because there's obviously investing in the stock market, ETFs, but real estate is another one of those methods. But I'm particularly interested, what made you choose real estate?
It kind of relates to the industry I'm in. I worked in banking and I actually joined banking during 2008 when the actual crash was happening, the global crash. And you just saw, property in terms of assets did suffer. But, we looked across the board. I was looking was working in credit risk actually. So that's all about managing the bank's portfolio of distressed assets. And I guess from a personal perspective, what I saw was that a lot of the bond market, the stock market, heavily affected and took a long time to recover. Property really took a hit as well. That was a huge component of the crash. But what I did see was that particularly in capital cities like your Londons, New York's, it recovered back to where it was in those prime cities within about 5 years, which I found really interesting at the time. I wasn't looking to invest in property at that time because I was early 20s and just about managing to pay my mobile phone bill. But I think I always kept that with me. So when it came to wanting to invest and look for an avenue to be financially independent, I kind of naturally gravitated back towards property.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. Nice. Okay, so from my side, so I'm Johnny. I originally grew up in the UK, did my studies, my university there, but I also studied and lived abroad, so first in France, and I now live here in Spain. And my journey of, financial independence, getting on track with my personal finances, it started in my younger years, something I carried through with my parents talking to me about the importance of managing money well. But really when I got my first job, having hung on to that, I really took it one step further and started looking into investing. So starting with the stock market, ETFs, index funds, and then having a platform such as Millennials with Money, which I created basically to try and help millennials and Generation Z as well. Given the struggles that we've gone through in our lifetime, to try and share some of the lessons, the experience I have to help people get on top of their finances and, break free from a lot of the stress and difficulties that we're facing. And then from a property perspective, kind of as I've gone on, learned more, that's all been part of the journey. And I've officially started my property investing journey last year, just with a small investment, which we can talk about a bit later in the video, but it's something that I've definitely been interested in as I've gone on through my journey. So you're an expert in the UK property market, Warren. You said, London is a very difficult market to get into unless you have a large startup capital, and you've particularly looked at cities up north. So you've looked at Hull, Liverpool, Manchester, for example. So what's going on in the UK market at the moment, and where do you think are particular cities in the north that are of interest to you and maybe to other people interested in getting started?
Yeah, there's a few good questions. In terms of what's going on, I'll start with the UK as a whole. Everybody remembers COVID. During that, what we actually saw for a good year and a half, 2 years, so I'm talking from around about the back end of 2020 through 2021 to about midway through 2022, when the budget was announced, but we'll get to that. There was a really huge boom. Well, boom is a strong word, but a surge in property prices. And what was driving that was a lot of people were, not just in London, by the way, in the UK, but globally, people were, you might be able to tell me actually if it was similar in Spain, but people were moving out of kind of dense urban areas and moving to more rural areas, trying to get bigger houses, bigger space, because they just wanted to be, understandably, away from big crowds and densely populated areas. So a lot of people were buying houses during that time. And of course, there was remote working as well. So people were like, hey, look, I'm working from home for the next year and a bit. So let me buy a house now and move. I don't need to be near the office anymore. So that happened. And then round about, back Q4 of 2022, we had a budget that was announced by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, who were the PM and Chancellor at the time. And what happened with that, it basically caused chaos in the market. So interest rates shot up, and it made everything more expensive. It made inflation do crazy things. And obviously, if you've got a mortgage, your interest payments are going to be higher. So it wasn't a good time to buy a house. So that cooled down the market. A lot of people were predicting a crash, but a crash hasn't happened, but it has cooled down. There has been negative growth in the UK for the majority of this year. So that's really the UK as a whole. To answer your question about why go up north, I think even whether it's a boom or a recession or an upturn or a downturn, there's always opportunities in property. There's never not opportunities. I just happen to think that there's more up north because it's more affordable. There's a lot more investment. Well, there is a lot of investment going up into the north as well. So it's a good time to get in there early, and that's why I invest.
A lot of what you've talked about there are some common themes in Spain as well. So talking about what happened over the past 2 years during the pandemic is there is, like the countryside in Spain, but obviously probably what most people know Spain for is the beach and the seaside and holidays. So whereas, yes, some people did buy outside of the city, myself included. I lived in the center of Madrid for 2 years, and then I bought my home kind of on the outside of Madrid, but still close enough distance. What a lot of other people did was maybe, whilst living in these big cities like Madrid or Barcelona, is they maybe moved to other smaller cities, which have a lot lower cost, and for the same reasons they can work remotely, because the concept of like a holiday property in Spain is very common as well. So that drove property prices up as well. Foreign investment, people from the US, from the UK, from elsewhere in Europe buying properties as well, because of taking advantage of when there were low interest rates in the market as well. But that, not because of, the UK budget, but more kind of because of the action of the European Central Bank and what's been going on with the Euribor over the past year or so. As you said, property prices are starting to slow down here as well, and a lot of people are having a lot of difficulty paying their mortgage as well if they've got a variable rate mortgage as well. In terms of like profitability, it's similar to what you said. People can invest in Madrid and Barcelona. You don't necessarily need a massive budget to do it. It can be done, but if you're thinking about profitability, then there are other more profitable cities around Spain as well, where you can, invest with a lower initial capital and probably get a higher return on your money as well. So the standout ones are, there's a city called Lleida in Catalonia. There's a city called there's a region called Almeria down in the south of Spain, and Huelva. Places like this, lower initial capital, but higher profitability when it comes from a return on investment. So your kind of deals and what you're interested in is mainly, are you mainly interested in buy-to-let or HMO? Do you have a particular model that you're following with your property investing?
In 2018, I started with just regular buy-to-lets because my philosophy is start with something that you understand, and then maybe progress after that onto some more complex strategies like HMOs, like service accommodation, etc. So the first I had. So let me just get this right. So I had the first two properties I bought were standard buy-to-lets in Sheffield and Liverpool. The third one I bought was a BRRR, that's buy, refurbish, refinance, and then rent it out. So that's probably one of the most complex strategies you can do. So I did that on my third property, a good 4 years into it. So I wanted to wait, and then now I'm in Hull and I'm looking at doing service accommodation. So I've slowly drifted towards more complex ones, and the reason why I want to go towards more complex strategies is because they return higher. You get bigger return on those, but I wanted to be ready to do those. I didn't want to go in on my first one and try and do a refurb in Manchester and not have a clue what I'm doing, because it would almost certainly have gone wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so just to go back through those different strategies. So buy to let is essentially you buy the property and you rent it to one or one tenant essentially, or
Yeah.
maybe got two people on the listing. HMO is where you have, you're renting out rooms in a house or an apartment, you've got multiple tenants. A BRRR is essentially, it's a flip. So you buy the property, you refurbish it, you rent it out, and you repeat. And the idea is, it's the accumulation of capital. Serviced accommodation is not something I've come across.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, some people call it holiday lets. It's Airbnb and Booking.com. So the reason why it's slightly more complex is that the complexity is around the maintenance and the upkeep of the house in between guests. Like logistically, there's a lot to it. So managing someone checking out, getting cleaners in to clean the house, doing the linens, having it ready for the next person to come in, and that might be a day later or that same day. That's really where the complexity comes, and also just having it up to a good standard. So it's almost like having a mini hotel. Your main competitors are, or comparables are hotels. So everything has to be really nice and up to standard in a service accommodation property.
Yeah, and I mean, you got the same models essentially that exist in Spain. Maybe talk about some of the challenges around each of them a bit later on in more detail, but essentially, yeah, you can rent out to one tenant, kind of a buy-to-let. You got multiple occupancy where it would typically be an apartment in Spain because of the way, the infrastructure is, renting out an apartment with multiple rooms. There's people that even, buy an apartment and they might create an additional room so that they can maximize the profitability as well. Airbnb is quite popular. You can obviously understand why. Spain gets a lot of tourism. The thing with Airbnb is there's a lot of licenses and regulations from the local town halls that come in, so that can be very complicated. And there are people that do flips in Spain, but from a tax perspective, it's not really favorable. So, most people, unless you're like a company that's dedicated to that, most people probably won't go into like a full-on flip. They might go for like a quick makeover, as it would probably be said in English, like to just tidy up, make it look a bit nicer, and then rent it out.
Yeah, I'd be interested to talk about the tax setup in Spain that kind of diverts people from doing it.
So in terms of the purchasing process, obviously I guess you have to travel when you go and obviously visit the property, and then when it comes to stuff like the appraisal or sign in for the property, do you have to travel as well? What is the general process?
To view a property, some people don't, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that. But to view a property, you want to go travel. So I travel up north to different cities quite well when I'm buying. I'm usually looking several different places and eventually home in on one. So I go and do the viewings, and I have a process that I go through when it comes to the viewing, stuff that I want from a house. So, stuff looking at the condition of it, what work would be required to be done, if any, the area, scoping all of that out. So that's the viewing part. Then you make an offer. Offer gets, hopefully accepted, and then you go through the process of the longest process, which is getting a mortgage approved and the conveyancing. That's done by your legal team. So that's really the process. So I wouldn't go back to a property after I viewed it really until the end of the process, once it's actually completed and I've bought it.
And do you apply for financing when you do your deals as well? And how do you manage that aspect at the same time as going through that process?
So I apply for a mortgage, and then they'll go out and have a look at what lenders would be willing to lend to you at that price. So you get an indication. It's not an offer, but it's an indication of how much you can borrow. And then once you make an offer and it's accepted, you basically convert that decision in principle to a firm offer. That's when they do stuff like the valuation, and they, ask you for all of your proof of income and a lot of background checks and KYC checks that goes into that. But that's really how it works, and that happens alongside the legal process.
Yeah, that was the same process pretty much I followed when I bought this apartment as well. One thing that I've noticed in Spain, at least from speaking to a mortgage expert here, she said that often if you go into the individual bank branches, you might be able to negotiate better interest rates because of the targets they have for mortgages approved, and their revenue targets. So sometimes it can be better than going through a broker or doing the process online. So it's good to know as well.
It's almost the opposite here. They say go for a broker to get the best rates, because an individual generally in this country can't get better rates themselves going to banks. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but then again, there's obviously the aspect of, particularly if you're a property investor, then having a banker who understands what it is you're doing, who knows you, who knows your profile, and what you've done in the past as well. So, and did the brokers, do they charge you a commission in the UK when you make your?
Between £300 and £500 each time. That's when they submit the application. So.
Okay, yeah. In Spain, you got similar. You've got a couple of brokers that charge commissions, but you've also got a few, not exactly brokers, but like mortgage finder services. So there's no cost to you as a buyer, but behind the scenes, the banks are paying commissions to the finder, so that they can get their mortgages approved.
There are also some brokers who work exactly the same way. London and Country are a good example. They call themselves one of the biggest mortgage brokers in the UK, but they get their commissions from the bank directly rather than from you.
So when you buy a property in the UK, what costs are associated both in the buying process and once you own the property, and estimations approximately of how much they cost?
Conveyancing costs, I'd say you'd want to budget round about £1,500 to £2,000 for that each time. You've also got your broker costs that I just mentioned, so between £300 and £500. You don't have to use a broker, of course. You can go to the bank directly, or you could try one of the brokers who get their fees directly from the bank. So you could pay nothing for that. But I personally use paid brokers because they do get me access to what I perceive as market leading rates. You've also got stamp duty. So stamp duty is the tax on any property bought in the UK, and that's a percentage of the value. So it depends. There's a good site. If you just type in, if you're in the UK, stampduty.gov, you can put in the price of the property, whether it's your first or second one. It will tell you how much stamp duty you'll pay. But to give you a rough estimate on UK, on the properties that I buy, that are around between £100,000 and £130,000 each time up north, stamp duty is round about £3,000 each time on those. And then you've got insurance costs. So when you buy the house, you have to insure it. That's when when you complete. So that's about £30 a month. And you pay that for the duration of owning that house, unless you don't want to insure it, which would be very unwise. Operational costs, you've got the insurance costs that are ongoing. You've got agent fees. So if you have your property managed by a letting agent, you've got those. anywhere between 8% and 12% per month of gross rent. You've also got, if you own a flat as opposed to a freehold house, you've got service charge and ground rent. So service charge can be, I mean, it really does vary. It depends on who's managing it. But on average, I've paid, for the ones that are flats for service charge, I've paid around about 1,500 per year, and ground rent around about £300 per year. And I think that's everything.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. And also you've got repairs, so ad hoc. Of course, houses wear and tear. So plumbing, boiler needs replacing, stuff gets broken, you know, just budget.
Yeah. So in Spain, there's two possibilities that are probably comparable to stamp duty. So you've got one, if it's a brand new property, then you'll pay VAT on it, known as IVA in Spanish. And the VAT rate for properties is about 10%. The alternative is it's a second-hand property, like someone's owned it before and is selling it to you. And this is where, depending on which region in Spain you're in, it can vary. So Spain is broken up into 17 different autonomous regions. So almost the same way like states in the US have different tax rates, Spain's autonomous regions, they have some autonomy over different tax percentages. So for example, in Madrid, if you buy a second-hand property, then your ITP, it's known in Spanish, it would be about 6%. Whereas if you bought in Barcelona, it would be 11%. And that's because the governments of the Madrid region and the governments of Catalonia have set different tax rates for the transmission of property, essentially. But typically depending on the region, most of them tend to fall within like the 7 to 9% bracket. But then you got like Madrid is at the lower end. I think you've got the Basque country as well has its own like tax regime exempt from the central government, so it's down to 4%. And then I think Valencia and Barcelona are up at like Catalonia up at the top. So that's kind of the stamp duty equivalent in terms of, and that's pretty much going to be like the biggest purchasing cost of the property, because the other costs you have are like the appraisal, which depending on the property, it's probably going to cost you between 200 to 300 euros. Then you've got registry, notary fees when you go and sign for the property. Again, that's probably going to be about 1,000 euros. That's when you buy. What else have you got? That's kind of the buying cost. So a typical budget for costs associated with the purchase of a property, between 10 and 15% of the property value is the general rule given here. Then when you've got the property, if you're living in like an apartment building and there's shared areas, you basically got this charge called comunidad, which is like communal costs. So if your building's got, like cleaning, maintenance, if it's got an elevator, if you're a lucky person and there's a pool in your building, then all of these things are covered by that. And very, very basic, can start at like 40 euros. So if it's like a really old building without a lift and just stairs, then probably down at the lower end. If you've got a pool, if you've got a lift, then it's obviously going to be much higher, probably in the hundreds of euros. Not too high, but 1 to 200. Yeah, it's probably a service charge equivalent. Yeah. Got your annual property tax, which is basically determined based on the cadastral value of the property, which, without getting too much into that, there's kind of a register of properties that you can consult, and then from that, the cadastral value of the property will determine how much property tax you pay each year. And then in some regions, you've got other miscellaneous taxes like waste and garbage tax. In Madrid, they got rid of a lot of these additional taxes, but some regions still have them. So, and like you said, maintenance, again, probably estimate about 10%. And then, like rental agencies that manage the property for you, they'll typically take, again, like 10% of your gross rent.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you found it useful. If you have any other questions on anything we discussed, let me know in the comment section below, guys. Thanks as always for supporting the channel. Please continue to like and subscribe, and most importantly, share this channel and these videos with other people that you think might benefit from it. That is how these channels grow, and I'll see you guys on the next one.